A single father saved an abandoned girl in a wheelchair from the rain. The truth left him in tears and changed their lives forever. A story that will touch your heart. Subscribe, leave your like, and comment where you're watching from. The March rain in New York fell with a violence that seemed intent on washing the entire city away. The heavy drops hammered against the windshield of the black BMW as David Johnson drove through the deserted streets of West Side, returning from yet another meeting that had stretched until nearly midnight. At 42, he had built an empire in the tech sector, but he felt emptier with each passing day since Sarah had left 8 months ago. The gated community where he lived appeared before him, with its high walls and electronic gates promising security and privacy. But as he waited for the gate to open, something caught his attention. A small figure was leaning against the outer wall of the community, partially sheltered by an awning. It was a young girl in a wheelchair, drenched by the rain that the wind pushed under the small shelter. David parked the car and got out, feeling the cold rain immediately. Soaked through his Italian suit, he approached slowly, noticing that the girl couldn't be more than 17. Her brown hair clung to her pale face, and she was visibly shivering from the cold. "Hi, are you okay?" he asked, crouching down to her level. The young girl lifted her eyes. They were green and glimmered with contained tears. I have nowhere to go," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible beneath the storm's noise. David felt something tighten in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in a long time. It was as if a dormant part of him suddenly awakened. "What's your name?" "Sophia," she replied, wiping her nose with the sleeve of her soaked shirt. "Sophia Almeida." "Sophia, I can't leave you here in the rain. Do you have family? Someone I can call?" She shook her head negatively, and David saw that her hands were purple from the cold. Every rational part of him screamed that this was madness, that he should call social services and let professionals handle the situation. But looking at that defenseless girl, something deeper spoke louder. "Listen, Sophia, I can't leave you here. Do you want to come to my house? At least until we get through the night and I can help you find a safe place." Sophia's eyes widened. "You don't know me. How can you trust me?" David smiled for the first time in months. "Maybe because you remind me that there's still kindness in the world. And maybe because my late wife would tell me exactly that if she were here." Carefully, he helped Sophia transfer to the back seat of the car, folding the wheelchair to put in the trunk. During the short drive to his home, he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the young girl, looking out the window with an expression of relief mixed with apprehension. David's house was spacious and modern, with large windows that during the day offered a privileged view of the city, but that night, illuminated only by automatic lights, it felt more like a museum than a home. For months it had only been him and his son Ethan, 15, inhabiting those rooms that once echoed with Sarah's laughter. "Ethan must be asleep," David murmured as he helped Sophia inside. "You'll meet him tomorrow." He led her to the guest room on the ground floor, which hadn't been used since Sarah's parents last visited. The room had a comfortable bed, a spacious wardrobe, and a small study table by the window. More importantly, it had an accessible bathroom that Sarah had insisted on when they renovated the house. "Why are you doing this for me?" Sophia asked when David brought clean towels and a robe. He paused for a moment, searching for the right words. "My wife always said that life puts people in our path for a reason. Maybe you need help, or maybe I need a reason to remember that I can still make a difference in someone's life." Sophia watched him closely. "Your son. He won't mind my presence. Ethan is a good boy. He's just going through a tough time. He lost his mother not long ago, and I've been too absent as a father." David's voice faltered a bit at the end. "I'm sorry," Sophia said sincerely. "I also lost my parents. I know how much it hurts." David nodded, feeling an unexpected connection with the young girl. Rest now. We'll talk more tomorrow, and I'll see how I can truly help you." As he was leaving the room, Sophia called out, "Mr. David." "Just David is fine." "David? Thank you. It's been a long time since anyone was kind to me without wanting anything in return." He smiled sadly. "Good night, Sophia." As he climbed the stairs to his room, David passed by the slightly open door of Ethan's room. His son was awake, looking out the window. "Dad, I heard voices down there." David entered the room and sat on the edge of the bed. "I found a young girl abandoned on the street, son. I brought her home to spend the night. Tomorrow I'll figure out what to do." Ethan frowned. "Dad, you don't even know this person. What if she's dangerous? She's in a wheelchair, soaked from the rain, and has nowhere to go. Sometimes, Ethan, we need to trust our instincts to do what's right." Ethan sighed. "Sometimes you're too good for your own good, Dad. Mom always said that." David kissed his son's forehead. "Maybe she still speaks through you." Later, lying in his empty bed, David stared at the ceiling while the rain continued outside. For the first time in months, he didn't feel completely alone. There was something about Sophia, a quiet strength in her green eyes, that made him believe that this impulsive decision could be the beginning of something new. Emily was exactly what he and Ethan needed. Downstairs, Emily was also awake, staring at the ceiling of a room that smelled of cleanliness and care. For the first time in years, she was in a place where she felt safe. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for now, that was enough. The aroma of fresh coffee woke David the next morning. For a moment he was confused, thinking he was dreaming. Sarah always made coffee before he woke up. But as he went down the stairs, he found Emily in the kitchen, skillfully maneuvering her wheelchair while preparing breakfast. "Good morning," she said a bit shyly. "I hope you don't mind. I woke up early and, well, I wanted to feel useful." David observed the meticulously set table. There were fresh croissants. She must have ordered them from the front desk, perfectly sliced fruits, and a simple cake that smelled of cinnamon. "Did you make this cake?" he asked, impressed. "I found the ingredients in your pantry. It's a recipe my mom taught me." Emily blushed slightly. "She always said that homemade bread brings peace to a home." Ethan appeared at the kitchen door, still in his pajamas, his hair tousled. At 15, he had inherited his father's height, but had his mother's sensitive eyes. He looked from David to Emily with cautious curiosity. "Ethan, this is Emily. Emily, my son Ethan." "Hi," Ethan murmured, heading straight for the fridge. "Ethan," David's voice carried a slight reprimand. "Emily made breakfast for us." The boy stopped and looked at the table, noticing for the first time the effort Emily had put in. "Oh, thanks," he said more politely. "It's been a while since I've seen the kitchen being used properly." Emily smiled softly. "I like to cook. It calms me." During breakfast, David discreetly observed the dynamic between the two young people. Ethan was clearly uncomfortable, but he wasn't hostile. Emily, for her part, didn't force conversation, respecting the space he needed. "Emily," David said, "I need to understand your situation better. Do you have any documents, any legal guardian?" Emily's face closed off slightly. "My parents died in a car accident 3 years ago. I was in the back seat, that's how." She gestured vaguely to her wheelchair. "I stayed with my aunt for a while, but she couldn't handle me. She said I was too much of a burden." Ethan stopped chewing, looking at her with more attention. "Since then, I've been through several foster families. The last one didn't work out." Emily avoided the details, but David could imagine. "Yesterday morning, the social worker told me there were no more families available for people with my needs." "So you were on the street?" Ethan's voice had an indignant tone. "It wasn't exactly like that," Emily explained. "They took me to a temporary shelter, but it was complicated. I left there yesterday afternoon and kept walking, or rather rolling, around the city until it started to rain." David felt a deep anger rising in his chest. How could the system fail so completely with such a young girl? "And school?" he asked. "Were you in school?" Emily's eyes lit up for the first time. "I love studying, especially math and programming. I taught myself using the public library computers. I have some online certificates." "Programming?" Ethan suddenly became interested. "What languages do you know?" "Python, JavaScript, a bit of Java. I also started studying machine learning." Emily became visibly more animated. "I've always wanted to work in technology." David and Ethan exchanged surprised glances. David's company specialized in technological solutions for accessibility, and he recognized genuine passion when he saw it. "Emily," David said carefully, "what would you say if I offered for you to stay here for a while, until we can sort out your documentation and find a suitable school?" Ethan looked at his father in alarm. "Dad, you can't—" "Ethan." David's voice was firm but gentle. "Can we talk later?" Emily looked from one to the other, tears forming in her eyes. You barely know me. Why would you do this?" David leaned forward. "Because everyone deserves a chance, Emily, and because I have a feeling you can teach us as much as we can help you." "I don't want to be charity," Emily said, proud. "And you won't be," David replied. "If you have knowledge in programming, maybe you can help me with some projects at the company. It would be a fair exchange." Ethan abruptly stood up from the table. "Dad, can I talk to you?" In the office, Ethan closed the door and turned to his father. "Dad, what are you doing? We don't even know this girl." David sighed, sitting in his armchair. "Ethan, I know it seems impulsive." "Seems. It is," Ethan interrupted. "First, you bring a stranger home in the middle of the night, and now you want her to live here. What if she's lying about everything? What if she's not?" David looked firmly at his son. "Ethan, when your mother died, I promised myself that I would try to be a better man, that I would try to make a difference in the world. Emily needs help, and we can help her. But what if she just brings problems?" David stood up and placed his hands on his son's shoulders. "Sometimes, son, doing what's right involves risks. Your mother taught me that." Ethan lowered his head. I just don't want you to get hurt again, Dad. I don't want us to get hurt again." David hugged his son, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "I understand, Ethan, but look into her eyes and tell me you see malice there." When they returned to the kitchen, Emily was washing the dishes, despite the difficulty her position in the wheelchair caused. "Emily," David said, "Ethan and I talked. You can stay for as long as you need." She turned, her eyes shining with emotion. "Really?" Ethan hesitated, then sighed. "Welcome to the Johnsons' house," he said, trying to smile. Emily began to cry with relief, and for the first time in a long while, David's home echoed with something beyond silence. It was the sound of hope being born again. A week had passed since Emily arrived at the Johnsons' house, and the family's routine began to shape itself naturally. Every morning, the aroma of homemade bread filled the kitchen, and David found he missed that smell when he left early for meetings. Emily had insisted on contributing to household chores, creatively adapting to the limitations of her wheelchair. On that Thursday in April, David was working in his home office when he heard Ethan shouting in frustration upstairs. He went up to investigate and found his son sprawled on the bed, surrounded by math books. "Dad, I can't understand this advanced algebra crap. The teacher explains it like everyone is a genius." "Want me to take a look?" David offered, although he knew his math skills were rusty. "I got this," said a voice at the door. Emily was there, holding a notebook. "Can I try to help?" Ethan hesitated. "I don't know. It's pretty complicated." Emily approached and looked at the exercises over Ethan's shoulder. Her eyes quickly scanned the equations, and David saw her expression shift from uncertainty to confidence. "Ah, I see the problem," she said. "You're trying to solve it the hardest way. Look." For the next 30 minutes, David watched in fascination as Emily explained complex mathematical concepts in a clear and simple way. Ethan, who moments ago was on the verge of a nervous breakdown, was now solving exercises with ease. "How did you learn this?" Ethan asked, impressed. "I've had a lot of time alone in the past few years," Emily explained. "Reading and studying were my way of escaping. Math has always made sense to me. It has logic, order, unlike other things in life." David observed their interaction and felt something shift in his chest. It was the first time he had seen Ethan genuinely excited about studying since Sarah's death. Later that night, after Ethan went to bed, David found Emily in the living room, typing furiously on an old laptop she had borrowed. "What are you doing?" he asked, sitting down. On the couch next to her. "I have a personal project," Emily said, slightly blushing. "It's kind of silly. Tell me about it." Emily turned the laptop screen toward him. On the screen were lines and lines of code, and David immediately recognized that it was something much more sophisticated than he expected from a self-taught teenager. "It's an app to help people with disabilities find accessible places in the city," Emily explained. "You can rate restaurants, stores, cinemas, anywhere, and other users can see the reviews and know if it's worth going." David studied the code more closely. It was elegant, well-structured, professional. "Emily, this is amazing. Did you do all this by yourself?" "For the last 6 months, in libraries," she confirmed. "It's not ready yet, but can I see the interface design?" Emily clicked through some tabs, showing wireframes and prototypes that demonstrated not only technical knowledge, but a deep understanding of user needs. David was silent for a long moment. In his company, he had seen senior programmers produce less elegant code than that. "Emily, I need to tell you something," he finally said. "My company works exactly with this. Assistive technology and accessibility. What you've created here is exactly the kind of solution our clients are asking for." Emily's eyes widened. "Really? Can I ask you a question? Would you like to visit the company tomorrow? Meet our team?" Emily hesitated. I don't know if I'm ready for that." David noticed her insecurity. "It wouldn't be an interview or anything formal, just a visit, for you to see what we do and for our team to meet a brilliant mind." The next morning, David arrived at the office with Emily by his side in the car. The Access Tech building was located in Silicon Valley, a modern construction with ramps and all the necessary adaptations for accessibility. "Nervous?" David asked as they entered the elevator. "A little," Emily admitted. "What if they think I'm just a kid playing at programming?" "Emily, in 20 years in the tech industry, I've rarely seen anyone with your natural talent. Trust me." The Access Tech office was an open and colorful space, with adapted workstations and a comfortable break area. David introduced Emily to his core team. "Everyone, I want to introduce you to Emily Smith. She's a young developer who is creating something revolutionary." Mark, the team's technical lead, a 35-year-old black man with visual impairment, extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, Emily. David told me you're working on something interesting." Emily explained her app, and David saw the team's eyes light up as she described the features. "Can I see the code?" asked Lisa, the company's UX designer. For the next hour, Emily showcased her work to the team. The technical questions they asked were complex, and David felt proud watching her respond with confidence and knowledge. "Emily," Mark finally said, "this is professional-level work. Have you thought about developing this commercially?" Emily looked at David, who nodded encouragingly. "I never thought it was possible." "What if Access Tech helped you develop and launch the app?" David suggested. "As a partnership." "Partnership?" Emily seemed confused. "You would retain the intellectual property of the project," David explained. "We provide resources, guidance, and market access. In return, we help turn your idea into a reality that can impact thousands of people." Emily was silent for a long moment, tears forming in her eyes. You really believe in my work?" "Emily," Lisa said gently, "I've been in this field for 10 years. What you've created is not just good. It's necessary. It's exactly what our community needs." On the way home, Emily was quiet, absorbing everything that had happened. "How do you feel?" asked David. "Confused," she admitted. "A week ago I was on the street not knowing where to sleep. Today I'm discussing business partnerships for an app that I thought was just a hobby." David smiled. "Sometimes life changes very quickly. The question is, are you ready for the change?" Emily looked out the car window, watching New York City rush by. "I think so," she said, her voice gaining determination. "I think I'm ready for anything. May arrived with its chilly mornings and the approach of the summer festivities that were already beginning to color New York." David woke up that Monday with a clear mission: to regularize Emily's situation so she could enroll in a quality private school and have access to all the opportunities she deserved. "It can't be that complicated," he murmured to himself as he prepared to face the bureaucracy. In the kitchen, Emily was making her famous sugar bread, a recipe she had learned from her mother and which had become a morning tradition in the Johnson household. Ethan was sitting at the table, doing homework with a concentration that David hadn't seen in months. "Good morning, family," said David, kissing the top of Emily's head in a paternal way and ruffling Ethan's hair. "Dad," said Ethan, looking up from his books, "you need to see the grades I got on my math test." David took the test that Ethan proudly extended, a 9.5 in a subject that had previously been a source of nightmares for the boy. "Ethan, this is fantastic." "It wasn't me," said Ethan, looking at Emily with genuine gratitude. "It was Emily. She has a way of explaining things that makes everything seem easy." Emily blushed, but David saw the joy in her eyes. "I like to help, and Ethan is very smart. He just needed a different approach." "Speaking of which," said David, "today we're going to sort out your school situation, Emily. I've already called St. Cecilia Academy. They have excellent accessibility features and an advanced math program." Emily's face lit up. "Really? I could actually study there?" "Let's find out." 2 hours later, David was in the principal's office at the academy, facing his first bureaucratic barrier. "Mr. Johnson," said the principal, a woman in her 50s with severe glasses, "I understand your charitable intention, but the minor's legal situation is complex." "Complex how?" David kept his tone calm, but Emily sensed the tension in his voice. "She does not have an official legal guardian. Technically, she is still under the state's guardianship. To enroll her here, we would need authorization from the Child Protective Services, social service reports, as well as documentation proving her previous educational situation." Emily felt her stomach sink. "How long does this take?" she asked. "In cases I know of, between 3 to 6 months, sometimes longer." David leaned forward. "Principal, Emily is an exceptional young woman. She has advanced knowledge in math and programming. Can't we just expedite the process?" "Mr. Johnson, rules are rules. Furthermore, I must be frank. Some parents have already questioned the presence of young people in vulnerable situations at the school. We have a standard to maintain." Emily felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. David stood up abruptly. "Thank you for your time, Principal. We will seek a school that values human potential above prejudices." Outside the academy, Emily was quiet in the passenger seat. David, maybe it's better if I try public school instead. I don't want to cause any trouble. Emily, look at me. David stopped the car and turned to her. You are not a problem. You are a brilliant solution looking for the right place to flourish. That afternoon, David was at his company when he received a call that made his blood run cold. Mr. Johnson, this is Robert Smith from Smith Investments. Robert was one of the largest investors in Access Tech, responsible for 30% of the company's capital. Robert, how are you? Worried, David. Very worried. The man's voice was cold. I've heard that you've been distracted, taking abandoned girls to visit the company, talking about partnerships with minors. David clenched his fists. Where did you get this information? New York is not a big city when you move in the right circles, David. The question is, have you lost focus on the business? My focus has never been clearer, Robert. It doesn't seem that way. Your competitors are saying that David Johnson is more concerned with playing social worker than generating results. That's not good for our image. David felt his anger rise. Robert, you know my results over the last 5 years. A personal decision does not affect. It does, David. Investors do not like emotional instability in their CEOs. I am considering withdrawing my investment. The call ended, and David stared at the phone in shock. Mark entered the room at that moment, noticing his boss's expression. David, are you okay? Mark, sit down. David took a deep breath. I need to tell you what's going on. After explaining the situation, Mark shook his head in disbelief. David, in the last 5 years, you have tripled the company's revenue. We have developed solutions that have changed the lives of thousands of people with disabilities. And now some rich people are questioning your competence because you helped a girl. It's more complicated than that, Mark. No, it isn't. Mark leaned forward. It's exactly that simple. Emily is brilliant. I've seen her work. If Robert Smith can't see the value in that, the problem is his, not ours. That night during dinner, David shared the events of the day. Emily turned pale upon hearing about the conversation with Robert. David, I don't want you to lose your company because of me. Ethan, who had been quiet, suddenly exploded. What? A jerk! Seeing his father's disapproving look, he corrected himself. Sorry, Dad, but that Robert is an idiot. Emily is the best thing that has happened in this house since the mother is gone. David and Emily looked at Ethan in surprise. It was the first time he mentioned Sarah naturally since the funeral. Ethan is right, said David. Robert can go to hell. We have built something valuable here, the three of us. I won't let the fear or greed of others destroy this. Emily reached across the table to hold David's hand. Thank you for believing in me. Emily, David said, tomorrow we will go to the family court. We will start the legal process for me to become your guardian. And if the bureaucracy wants to complicate things, I will hire the best family lawyer in New York. Ethan smiled. Dad, does this mean Emily will be our real family? David looked at Emily, who had tears in her eyes. If she wants to, yes. Emily couldn't speak. She just nodded vigorously. Outside, the May rain began to fall, but inside the Johnson home, there was warmth, determination, and something that hadn't existed for a long time. The feeling that they were facing challenges together as a true family. The month of May brought with it the typical atmosphere of the summer fairs that began to color New York. In the West Side neighborhood, colorful banners appeared in the streets, and the smell of hot cider and peanut candy began to fill the air. David had decided it would be good for Emily to participate in the community festivities, a way for her to integrate and meet the neighbors. I've never been to a real summer fair, Emily confessed as she got ready in the bedroom mirror. She had bought a plaid shirt and pigtails with her first earnings from her consulting at Access Tech. "You're going to love it," said Ethan, who appeared at the door wearing a plaid shirt and a straw hat. "Mum always said summer fairs bring out the best in people." David smiled at hearing his son mention Sarah without sadness in his voice. "Your mother made the best rice pudding in New York," he said. "Maybe Emily can try her recipe." In the gated community's square, the fair was in full swing. There were stalls with typical foods, children and teenagers practicing, folk dances, and the sound of an accordion filled the air. David pushed Emily's wheelchair among the people, introducing her to the neighbors. "David," called a familiar voice. It was Mrs. BMW, a 70-year-old lady who had lived in the gated community for decades and knew the history of all the residents. "Who is this lovely young lady?" "Mrs. BMW, this is Emily. She is living with us." Mrs. BMW studied Emily with curious but kind eyes. "Oh, how nice to have a female presence in your home again. These men need some care." Emily smiled shyly. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. BMW." "You remind me of someone," the lady said, furrowing her brow in thought. "Those green eyes. Where have I seen those eyes?" Ethan appeared with 3 cups of hot cider. "Emily, you have to try this. It's a tradition." As they savored the warm drink, which warmed their bodies on the chilly May night, Emily observed the families around. Children ran between the stalls, parents danced folk dances with embarrassing enthusiasm, and there was a sense of community that she hadn't felt in years. "Are you enjoying it?" David asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "It's like the whole city turned into one big family," Emily said. "My parents used to take me to fairs like this when I was little. I'd forgotten how good it felt." Just then, Mrs. BMW returned, accompanied by a middle-aged woman in a maid's uniform. "Emily, dear, this is Constance. She has worked here in the neighborhood for many years. Constance, isn't this the girl you were looking for?" Constance looked closely at Emily, and her eyes widened. "My God! Emily? Emily Smith?" Emily turned pale. You know me?" "Child, I worked in your parents' house for 5 years. You were tiny, but I remember those green eyes very well." Constance approached the wheelchair, her hands trembling with emotion. "I was in the house when you left that night. The night of the accident." David and Ethan exchanged glances, realizing something important was happening. "Constance," Emily said, her voice trembling, "did you know my parents? Did I know them? Dear, I loved them like family. Your father, Dr. Paul, and your mother, Mrs. Marina, were the kindest people I ever met. When I heard about the accident—" Constance wiped her tears with her apron. Emily grabbed the woman's hand. "Constance, I need to know, were my parents poor? Everyone always told me they left nothing behind, that I depended on the charity of others." Constance frowned, confused. "Poor? Child, your parents owned Smith Systems. They weren't millionaires, but they had a very good life. The house in Upper East Side, the office in West Village." David felt his stomach drop. "Emily, you never knew this?" "Never," Emily whispered. "My aunt always said they only had debts, that I was a burden no one could carry." Constance was indignant. "What a damn lie! Your father developed software for hospitals. The company was worth a lot of money. And your aunt, that viper, has always been jealous of the life your brother managed to build." "What happened to the company?" David asked, already suspecting the answer. "After the funeral, a man came claiming to be Dr. Paul's partner, a guy named Evan, your aunt's brother. He said he would take over the business until Emily turned of age. The company was sold within weeks." Emily was trembling. Ethan placed his hand on her shoulder in a gesture of support. "Constance," David said carefully, "do you know this man's full name?" "Evan Smith. A skinny man, always in an expensive suit, with a smile that never reached his eyes. I never liked him." David stood still. Evan Smith had been a minority partner at Access Tech for 3 years, responsible for 15% of the company. A man David had always considered a reliable partner. "Emily," Constance said, taking the young woman's hands, "your parents left everything for you, the house, the company bank accounts. You should have inherited a considerable amount." As she turned 18, Emily began to cry, not out of sadness, but from a deep anger that had been building for years. "He stole everything from me. He made me believe that I was worthless, that I was a burden." David was processing the information quickly. Evan had always been very interested in Access Tech's accessibility projects. Now, David understood why. He was probably using the knowledge he stole from Emily's father's company. "David," whispered Ethan, "do you know this Evan?" David nodded gravely. "Unfortunately, I do." "What are we going to do?" Emily asked, wiping her tears. David looked at her with determination. "We are going to reclaim what is yours, Emily, every penny he stole from you." Constance smiled for the first time since the conversation began. "Your parents would be proud of the young woman you have become, my dear, and proud to know that you found a family that fights for you." As they returned home that night, the atmosphere was heavy but resolute. Emily was quiet, processing years of lies that were finally coming to light. "Emily," David said when they arrived home, "I want you to know one thing. No matter what we discover about your inheritance, you will always have a place in this family." Ethan nodded vigorously. "We are a team now." Emily looked at the two men who had become her family in such a short time. "Thank you for everything, but now I want more than justice. I want Evan to pay for what he did to me and to the memory of my parents." David smiled, but there was something dangerous in his eyes. "He will pay, Emily. You can be sure of that." Outside, the last echoes of the summer festival faded into the night, but inside the Johnson home, a family was preparing for the biggest battle of their lives. June arrived with its characteristic chill in New York, but the atmosphere in the Johnson home was warmed by a mix of determination and controlled anger. In the days following Constance's revelation at the summer festival, David spent hours on the phone with lawyers, private investigators and accountants, trying to trace the whereabouts of Emily's stolen inheritance. Ethan, in turn, had become Emily's official protector at school. After some nasty comments from classmates about the girl in the wheelchair who lives with the Johnsons, he did not hesitate to defend his new sister with the ferocity he inherited from his father. "Ethan came home with a torn uniform yesterday," Emily commented while preparing breakfast. "He said he tripped, but I saw the scratches on his knuckles." David sighed, sipping his coffee. "I talked to him. I told him I'm proud to have a son who defends his family, but that violence solves nothing." "And what did he say?" "That sometimes it does solve things, and that I should remember that when facing Evan." Emily laughed for the first time in days. "He's not wrong." At that moment, Ethan came down the stairs, already dressed for school but with a grim expression. "Dad, I need to tell you something." David and Emily looked at him with concern. "Yesterday, after the fight, Henry, one of the boys who was picking on Emily, told me something strange." "What?" David asked. "He said his dad mentioned at home that you were taking care of a girl to look good after stealing her company." Emily went pale. "How could he know that?" David felt a chill run down his spine. "Ethan, what is Henry's dad's name?" "Dr. Henry Foster. He's a lawyer." David closed his eyes. Foster was Evan Smith's personal attorney. The pieces were falling into place in a disturbing way. "Dad," Ethan continued, "there's more. Henry said his dad thinks you're trying to cover up some scheme at the company." Emily slammed her fist on the kitchen table. "Evan is spreading lies about you. He's trying to tear us apart." David took a deep breath, trying to control his anger. Emily, Ethan, listen carefully. From now on, Evan will try everything to destabilize us. He knows we discovered the truth. That afternoon, David was in his office at Access Tech when Mark entered with a worried expression. "David, we have a problem. I just received calls from 3 important clients. They are canceling their contracts." "Why?" "Concerns about instability in the company's leadership and changes in corporate values." They all used very similar terms. David felt his stomach drop. "Evan, that's what I'm thinking. He has contacts throughout the industry. He might be sabotaging our reputation." At that moment, David's secretary appeared at the door. "Mr. David, there's a man here who wants to speak with you. He says it's about Emily Johnson." David and Mark exchanged tense glances. "Send him in." The man who entered the room was thin, dressed in an expensive suit, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, exactly as Constance had described. Evan Smith in person. "David, my friend," Evan said, extending his hand as if nothing had happened. "We need to talk." David ignored the outstretched hand. "Mark, can you give us a moment?" Once they were alone, Evan comfortably sat in the armchair across from David's desk. "So, you've met little Emily," he said, his tone seemingly casual. "A problematic girl, that one. Always been quite fanciful." "Fanciful?" David's voice was dangerously calm. "Oh, yes. Always making up stories about imaginary inheritances, about her family having money. Poor. In thing, the accident affected her little head." David slowly stood up. "Evan, I'm going to give you a chance to leave my company and my life before I do something we might regret." Evan laughed. David, you don't understand the situation. I have a stake in this company. I have contracts that protect my interests. And now I have information that could be damaging to your reputation." "What information?" "Well, a respected businessman who seduces vulnerable minors, brings them to his home, to his company. Could look very suspicious to the authorities, don't you think?" David felt his anger explode in his chest, but kept his voice controlled. "Get out of my office now." "David, be reasonable. All you need to do is send the girl away to a proper institution, and we can get back to business as usual." "Never." Evan sighed dramatically. "What a shame. Then I will have to take more drastic measures." He stood up and walked to the door. "By the way, did you know that Robert Smith is my brother-in-law? Funny how small the world is, isn't it?" After Evan left, David stood in the middle of the room, his hands trembling with anger. Mark rushed back in. "David, I overheard part of the conversation in the hallway. What a son of a—" "Mark," David interrupted, "I want you to document everything he just said. And I want you to hire the best private investigator in New York. I want every document, every transaction, every detail of this man's life investigated." That night, David got home and told everything to Emily and Ethan. Emily was visibly shaken. "David, maybe he's right. Maybe I should leave before I ruin your life completely." Ethan stood up abruptly. "Emily, don't say that. We're a family." David knelt beside Emily's chair. "Emily, look at me. This man has stolen your childhood, your legacy, your family. He will not steal our family too. But what if he manages to hurt you?" "Then we will fight," Ethan said with determination. "All together." David smiled, proud of his son. "Ethan is right. Evan underestimates one thing." "What?" Emily asked. "He fights alone for the wrong reasons. We fight together for the right reasons. And Emily—" David took her hands. "You are not alone in this. You will never be alone again." Emily began to cry, but they were tears of gratitude, not fear. "I love you both." "We love you too," Ethan said, hugging her. David looked at his makeshift family, a son becoming an upright man and a young woman who had brought purpose back into his life. Evan Smith had chosen the wrong fight. "Tomorrow we start to counterattack," David said, "and we will recover everything he stole from you, Emily. Everything." Outside, the cold June wind swayed the trees, but inside the Johnson home, 3 hearts beat as one, ready for the battle that awaited them. July brought the intense cold of New York's winter, and with it, a discovery that would change everything. David had hired Maria Johnson, a renowned private investigator in New York, known for uncovering truths that others preferred to keep hidden. After 3 weeks investigating Evan Smith, she finally had results. The morning was particularly cold when Maria arrived at the Johnson home. Emily was in the kitchen preparing hot chocolate, a habit she had developed on cold days, when the doorbell rang. The sweet and comforting aroma of the drink spread through the house, bringing a sense of coziness that contrasted with the tension of the moment. "Maria," David greeted her at the door, "I hope you have good news." Maria Johnson was a 45-year-old woman with grey hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that seemed to see through people. "Good and bad, David. May I come in?" In the living room, with Emily and Ethan present, Maria opened a folder full of documents. "First, the good news. I managed to trace a significant portion of Emily's assets. Evan was clever but not perfect. There is an account in the Cayman Islands with approximately $2 million that clearly came from the sale of Smith Systems." Emily's eyes widened. "$2 million? And that's just what I've managed to find so far," Maria continued. "But here comes the bad news. Evan did not act alone." David felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean?" Maria pulled out a photograph from the folder. It was an old image taken at some social event. "Do you recognize anyone in this photo?" David took the image and froze. In the photo, Evan was next to Robert Smith and Sarah. His deceased wife was smiling between the two men. Where did you get this?" David asked, his voice hoarse. "Social archive of the country club. 5 years ago. David, your wife knew Evan long before you did." Ethan stepped closer to his father, looking at the photo over his shoulder. "Dad, Mom never mentioned knowing this guy." Maria took a deep breath before continuing. "David, there's more. Your wife left a letter in a safe at the bank, a letter that was only to be opened in case of her death." "What letter?" David was confused. "The lawyer never mentioned any letter." "Because it wasn't with the family lawyer. It was with a private lawyer with specific instructions on when it should be delivered." Maria pulled out a sealed envelope from the folder. "The letter was to be delivered if 2 conditions were met: your death and you taking care of a young woman in a vulnerable situation." Emily frowned. How could she know this would happen? David took the envelope with trembling hands. The seal was still intact, and he immediately recognized the delicate handwriting of Sarah on the addressing. "Do you want me to read it first?" Maria offered gently. "No," David said, carefully opening the envelope. "If Sarah wrote to me, I need to read it." The letter was handwritten, in the careful script that David knew so well. "My dear David, if you are reading this, it means I have passed, and your kindness has led you to care for someone in need of help. Knowing your heart, I knew this would happen. I need to confess something I never had the courage to say in life. 5 years ago, Evan Smith approached me. He knew about my illness before I even did. He had contacts at the hospital where I had my first tests. He offered me a deal. Information about technology companies in exchange for money to fund my treatment. Abroad. David, I was scared of dying, scared of leaving you and Ethan. I accepted. It was only a few pieces of information, nothing that directly harmed our company. But I later found out that he used that information to destroy other smaller competitors. One of these companies was Smith Systems. When I learned what happened to the Smith family, I tried to stop. I threatened to expose everything. That's when Evan showed me evidence that I was involved. He said that if I spoke out, you would lose everything, the company, your reputation, maybe even Ethan. David, I used part of our personal fortune to try to make amends. I created a secret fund with $3 million intended to help young people in vulnerable situations. I always hoped that somehow this could balance out the harm I caused. If you are reading this while taking care of someone, use this money. It's my way of asking for forgiveness, even in death. The safe is at Chase Bank, West Village branch. The password is the date of our wedding. Forgive me, my love. And continue being the honorable man you've always been. With all my love and regret, Sarah. The silence in the room was deafening. David was pale, his hands trembling as he held the letter. Ethan had sat heavily on the sofa, processing the information that his mother had been involved in the destruction of Emily's family. Emily was the first to break the silence. David, she was trying to save her own life. Anyone would do the same. No, David said, his voice filled with pain. Sarah was always better than this. Fear made her do something she would never do under normal circumstances. Ethan looked up, his eyes red from held-back tears. Dad, does this mean our family destroyed Emily's family? Emily immediately moved closer to Ethan. Ethan, no. Your mother was a victim just as much as my parents were. Evan manipulated her, taking advantage of her fear and desperation. Maria, who had been observing the scene in respectful silence, finally spoke. David, there's something important in the letter. Sarah mentions evidence that Evan had against her. If we can find that evidence, we can prove that she was coerced, David completed, his legal mind starting to work, and use it against Evan. Emily took David's hand. David, do you understand what this means? Sarah knew. Somehow she knew that you would find me and left a way to help us. David looked at Emily, then at Ethan, finally understanding the magnitude of what had happened. It wasn't a coincidence, he murmured. None of this was a coincidence. Ethan stood up and hugged both his father and Emily at the same time. Mom is still looking out for us, he said, his voice choked. Maria closed the folder, respecting the family moment. David, when you're ready, we can go to the bank and check the safe. And then we'll go after Evan. With everything we have. David nodded, feeling for the first time in months that Sarah was still present, still trying to protect her family. Maria, thank you for everything. When Maria left, the family remained gathered in the living room, the hot chocolate cooling in the forgotten mugs. Outside, the July rain began to fall, but inside the house, 3 people embraced, united by shared pain and a common purpose. Let's make Sarah proud of us, David said. Let's, Emily agreed, and let's make Evan pay for everything he did to our families. August arrived with its characteristic fog covering New York, and with it came a discovery that no one in the Johnson family expected. David had spent the previous week at the bank, accessing the safe that Sarah had left, confirming that the $3 million were indeed there, along with documents revealing a corruption network much more complex than they had imagined. That Saturday morning, while Emily prepared her famous cinnamon rolls and Ethan studied for his final exams, David received an unexpected call. David? The voice on the other end was hesitant, almost whispered. This is Dr. Henry Foster. David tensed. Foster was Evan's lawyer, the father of the boy who had bullied Ethan at school. Dr. Foster, what can I do for you? I need to talk to you, in person. It's about Evan Smith and about your wife. 2 hours later, David was sitting in a discreet cafe in West Village, watching Dr. Foster nervously stir his cup of coffee. The lawyer was a well-dressed man in his 50s, but with deep, dark circles under his eyes and trembling hands. David, I need to start by apologizing for my son, For the things he said at school. Dr. Foster, I didn't come here to talk about teenage fights. No, of course. Foster took a deep breath. I came to talk about Evan and how he destroyed my life too. David leaned forward, intrigued. 5 years ago, Evan approached me with a proposal. He said he had information about technology companies that could be very profitable. All he needed was a lawyer to structure some acquisitions. What kind of acquisitions? Small, family-owned companies that were struggling. The plan was simple. Use insider information to create artificial crises in these companies, then buy them for very low prices. David felt his stomach drop. And you went along with it? Foster nodded, ashamed. I was going through financial problems, expensive divorce, office debts. Evan offered a lot of money. What does this have to do with Sarah? Your wife was the source of the information. Foster looked directly into David's eyes. But she didn't know what it was being used for. Evan told her it was for legitimate investments, market analysis. David clenched his fists. How many companies were destroyed? 7, over 3 years. Smith Systems was one of them. Foster picked up a folder that was beside his chair. David, I brought something for you. These are copies of all the documents, all the transactions, enough evidence to send Evan to prison for the next 20 years. Why are you doing this now? Foster laughed bitterly. Because I found out that my own son, was in his sights. Evan discovered that the boy has a talent for programming. He was planning to recruit him, just like he did with me and your wife. David flipped through the folder quickly, scanning the documents. They were contracts, bank transfers, emails, a complete trail of Evan's corruption. Dr. Foster, this is enough to completely destroy him. David, there's one more thing. Foster hesitated. Your wife. In the last months of her life, she tried to stop it. She threatened to tell everything. Evan said that if she spoke out, he would make sure you were implicated as an accomplice, that you would lose Ethan, the company, everything. She died believing she was protecting our family. Exactly. And David, she recorded several conversations with Evan, recordings where he admits to blackmail, extortion, everything. They're in this folder too. David felt a mix of anger and relief. Sarah had been smarter than Evan had imagined. That afternoon, back home, David gathered Emily and Ethan in the living room to show them what he had discovered. Does this mean we can sue him? Emily asked, looking at the documents. Emily, this means we can destroy him, David replied. We have evidence of fraud, extortion, blackmail, money laundering. Evan will spend the rest of his life in prison. Ethan was quiet, processing everything. Dad, does this clear Mom's name? Completely, son. The recordings clearly show that she was being blackmailed. Sarah was a victim, not an accomplice. Emily took David's hand. So can we recover my inheritance? Not just your inheritance, Emily. We can recover the assets of all the families that Evan destroyed, and with the $3 million that Sarah left, we can create a reparations fund for those families. Ethan smiled for the first time in weeks. Mom really is still looking out for us. That night, David called Maria Johnson. Maria, we have everything we need. Tomorrow morning, I want you to take these documents to the federal police. David, can I suggest something? Sure. Before we go to the police, how about we give Evan one last chance? Set up a meeting, confront him. With the evidence, give him the opportunity to turn himself in voluntarily. David thought for a moment. Do you think he would accept? Men like Evan are cowards when cornered. If he realizes he has no way out, he might try to make a deal. And would that be good for us? It would be better for Emily. A criminal trial can take years. If Evan confesses and returns the money voluntarily, she can recover her inheritance much faster. David looked at Emily, who was listening to the conversation. She nodded determinedly. "All right, Maria, set up the meeting. But if he doesn't accept, then we hand everything over to the federal police and let justice take its course." After hanging up, David watched his makeshift family. Ethan was helping Emily with a physics lesson, both laughing at some inside joke. Sarah would be proud to see how they had become a real family. "Emily," David said. "Yes?" "Regardless of what happens with Evan, I want you to know one thing. You are no longer that abandoned girl I found in the rain. You are my daughter, our family, forever." Emily smiled, tears shining in her green eyes. "Thank you, Dad." It was the first time she called him Dad, and David felt his heart swell with a joy he hadn't felt in a long time. Outside, the August fog covered the city, but inside the Johnson home, the truth was finally coming to light. September arrived with the promise of spring, and with it a surprise that none of the Johnsons expected. It was a sunny Saturday morning when Ethan came down the stairs with a determined expression that David recognized. The same one Sarah had when she decided something important. "Dad, Emily, I need to talk to you," Ethan said, sitting at the kitchen table where Emily was making pancakes for breakfast. David lowered the newspaper, noticing his son's serious tone. "What is it, Ethan?" Ethan placed an envelope on the table. "Do you remember when you gave me extra allowance last month to buy that new video game?" "Yes," Emily said, curious. "You said you changed your mind about buying it." "I lied." Ethan took a deep breath. "I didn't change my mind about spending the money. I changed my mind about what to spend it on." David frowned. "Ethan, what did you do?" The teenager opened the envelope and pulled out some papers. "I used my savings from the last 3 years, all the allowance I saved, the money I earned helping the neighbor with his garden, everything, to hire a family law attorney." Emily's eyes widened. "Ethan, you didn't have to—" "I did," Ethan interrupted, his voice filled with emotion. "Emily, you are my sister, for real, and I can't just stand by and watch that bastard Evan try to destroy our family." David was too emotional to speak. He looked at the documents Ethan had placed on the table. They were contracts from a respected law firm in New York. "Dr. Johnson specializes in asset recovery," Ethan explained. "I researched online, read articles about the cases he has won. He said that with the evidence we have against Evan, he can expedite the process of recovering Emily's inheritance." Emily started to cry. "Ethan, this must have cost a fortune." "It cost $8,000, Ethan said simply. "All my allowance from the last 3 years, plus the money I earned working. But it was worth every penny." David stood up and hugged his son tightly. "Ethan, I am so proud of you that I don't even know what to say. Dad, Mom always said that family protects each other. Emily protected us when she came here. She brought life back to this house. Now it's my turn to protect her." Emily maneuvered her wheelchair over to Ethan and hugged him with tears streaming down her face. "Ethan, you are the best brother I could ever have." That afternoon, the 3 of them went to Dr. Johnson's office, a 60-year-old man with an impeccable reputation in family law. When they learned the whole story, the attorney was impressed not only with the evidence against Evan, but also with the family's determination. "Ethan," said Dr. Johnson, "I rarely see a young man like you, at your age, to make such a mature and selfless decision." "It wasn't selfless," Ethan replied. "It was for my sister." During the following week, Dr. Johnson worked alongside Maria Johnson to organize the final confrontation with Evan. The meeting was scheduled for a Friday in September at the Access Tech office, in familiar territory for David. When Evan arrived, his usual arrogance had been replaced by visible nervousness. He entered the conference room and found David, Emily, Ethan, Dr. Johnson, and Maria Johnson waiting for him. "David, I didn't know it would be such a popular meeting," Evan said, trying to maintain a casual tone. "Take a seat, Evan," David said coldly. Dr. Johnson opened a folder and laid documents on the table. "Mr. Smith, I am Dr. Johnson, attorney for the Johnson family. We are here to discuss the full restitution of the stolen assets of Emily Smith." Evan laughed nervously. "Stolen? What accusation is this?" Maria placed a recorder on the table and pressed play. Helena's voice echoed in the room, followed by Evan's voice, admitting to blackmail and extortion. Evan's face immediately paled. "We also have," Dr. Johnson continued, "bank documents showing the diversion of funds from Smith Systems to your personal accounts, fraudulent contracts, and evidence of at least 7 companies destroyed through illegally obtained insider information." Evan looked around the table, realizing he was completely cornered. What do you want?" he asked, his voice trembling. Emily leaned forward. "I want my inheritance back, every penny you stole from my parents, and I want you to publicly confess what you did, so that other families can also recover what they lost." "And what if I refuse?" David smiled coldly. "Then on Monday morning, all this evidence goes to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You will be arrested for conspiracy, fraud, extortion, and money laundering. You'll spend the next 20 years in prison." Evan was silent for a long moment, processing his limited options. If I confess and return the money, you won't go to the police." Dr. Johnson replied, "Full restitution, public confession, and cooperation to identify other victims. In exchange, we won't file criminal charges." Ethan, who had been quiet until then, finally spoke up. "And you never come near our family again? Never?" Evan looked at the teenager, surprised by the firmness in his voice. "Additionally," Ethan continued, "you sell your share of my father's company for the symbolic amount of $1. David looked at his son, impressed by his insight. Evan sighed heavily. "And if I accept all these terms?" Emily replied, "Then you can try to rebuild your life without destroying others." After 2 hours of negotiation, Evan signed a comprehensive agreement. Emily would fully recover her inheritance, other affected families would be compensated, and Evan would completely exit the Johnsons' lives. When they left the office that night, Ethan was beaming. "Dad, we did it! We really did, son, and all because of you." Emily took Ethan's hand. "You know what impresses me the most? You spent your savings from years to help me, not even knowing if it would work." Ethan smiled. "Emily, family isn't about certainties. It's about doing the right thing, even when it's hard." David watched his 2 children. For now, Ethan and Emily were equally his children, and felt a deep gratitude for Helena leaving that letter, for Emily appearing in his life, and for Ethan becoming the upright young man he was. "Let's go home," David said. "We have a lot to celebrate." As they walked to the car that September night, 3 people who had become a true family savored the sweet taste of justice served and love demonstrated through actions, not just words. March had arrived again, completing a cycle of 14 months that forever transformed the lives of 3 people who met on a rainy night. The date marked exactly 1 year since David found Emily abandoned in her wheelchair near the gated community, and the Johnson family decided to celebrate that moment as a true rebirth. The house that was once a silent mausoleum now vibrated with life. In the kitchen, Emily finished preparing a special cake, a recipe she had created by blending the culinary traditions she learned from her mother with the new memories made with the Johnsons. The sweet aroma spread throughout the house, mingling with the scent of the flowers in the garden that she had lovingly replanted over the past few months. Ethan, now 16 and visibly more mature, helped set the dining table. In recent weeks, a new joy had taken over him, his younger, sister had been found, and after months of legal proceedings, she would finally come to live with them. "Dad," Ethan called to David, who was hanging small lights on the porch. "What time is Isabella arriving?" David checked the clock. "In an hour. Dr. Johnson said the final adoption papers were signed this morning." Emily appeared at the kitchen door, her green eyes shining with emotion. "I still can't believe we're going to be 4. A real complete family." In the past few months, after Evan confessed and fully returned the stolen assets, Emily had become a successful young entrepreneur. Her accessibility app, developed in partnership with Access Tech, already had over 100,000 users and was being nationally recognized. But what she was most proud of was the social program she had created with part of her recovered inheritance, a fund offering technology scholarships for young people in vulnerable situations. The doorbell rang, and the three rushed to the door. Outside stood Dr. Johnson with a 12-year-old girl, thin, with the same green eyes as Emily, but still carrying the wary look of someone who had spent too long in the foster care system. "Isabella." Emily extended her arms. In from the wheelchair, tears streaming down her face. "My little sister." The girl hesitated for a moment, then ran to hug Emily. "Emily, I thought I would never see you again." David watched the scene with emotion, remembering his own reunion with the hope that Emily had brought into his life. Ethan approached slowly, respecting the moment between the sisters. "Isabella," said Emily when the hug ended, "this is David, our adoptive father, and this is Ethan, our brother." Isabella looked at David with the same cautious eyes that Emily had on that first night. You really want me, and to live here?" David knelt down to be at the girl's level. "Isabella, this house only became a true home when your sister arrived. Now, with you here, our family is complete." Ethan smiled gently. "And I always wanted to have 2 younger sisters to protect." During the celebration dinner, with the table filled with special dishes prepared by Emily, and a decoration that mixed elements of a summer festival, in honor of the day they discovered the truth about Emily's past, the family shared stories and plans for the future. "Emily," said Isabella between bites, "is it true that you have a company?" Emily laughed. "Not exactly a company. I have an app and some social projects, but you know what's even cooler?" "What?" "Now I can help you study whatever you want. Math, science, programming, whatever interests you." Isabella smiled for the first time since she arrived. "I've always liked math." Ethan and Emily exchanged a knowing glance. Math was where everything had started between them too. David raised his glass of grape juice. "I want to make a toast. A year ago I was a lost man. Ethan was sad and you two were separated and in need of a family. Today we are 4 people who chose to love, protect, and grow together." "To Dad," said Emily, raising her glass. "To Emily, who taught us that family is built with love," added Ethan. Isabella, still shy but smiling, raised her glass too. "To our family." After dinner, while Isabella explored the room that would be hers, lovingly decorated by Emily and Ethan in the past weeks, David and Emily sat on the porch, watching the garden she had transformed. "Emily," said David, "can I tell you a secret?" "Of course." "That night I found you, I was driving aimlessly. I had just left a meeting where I signed papers to sell the company. I was giving up on everything." Emily looked at him in surprise. "Really?" "When I saw you there, alone in the rain, something inside me woke up. I realized I could still make a difference. I could still be important to someone." Emily took his hand. "David, you saved my life that night. But did you know you saved yours too?" David smiled. "How so?" "You found your purpose again. You found a reason to be the man That Sarah always knew you were. Ethan appeared on the porch with Isabella, who was wearing new pajamas that Emily had bought for her. Dad, Emily, Isabella wants to know if she can call the social worker to say she's okay. Of course, said David. And Isabella? Yes? Welcome to the Johnson family. As Isabella made her call, lovingly supervised by Ethan, David and Emily remained on the porch. A light rain had begun to fall, not the violent storm of that first night, but a gentle and comforting rain. You know what I learned this past year? Said Emily, watching the rain. Tell me. I learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to find what really matters. I lost my parents, my home, my childhood, but I found a family that chose me not out of obligation but out of love. David nodded. And I learned that doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. And that Sarah was right. Life puts people in our path for a reason. Ethan returned with Isabella, who was now smiling widely. Aunt Constance wants to come visit us on Sunday, announced Isabella. Can I say yes? Of course, said Emily. Constance is practically our adoptive grandmother. And can I invite my math teacher too? Asked Isabella excitedly. I want to show her that I found a family that loves to study. David laughed. Our home is always open to people who make you happy. Later that night, after Isabella had fallen asleep in her new room and Ethan had retired to study for finals, David and Emily stayed in the living room, planning the improvements they would make to the house to better accommodate their expanded family. David, said Emily suddenly. Yes? Thank you for not just calling social services that night. Thank you for risking everything for me. David smiled, remembering that rainy night that changed their lives. Emily, thank you for trusting a stranger and for bringing purpose back into my life. We're a good team, aren't we? The best. Outside, the rain continued to fall gently, but there was nothing threatening about it anymore. It was just water nourishing the garden that Emily had planted, making new flowers grow that would scent the house in the days to come. The Johnson family had found their way through the storm, and now, united. By love, by choice, and by the courage to do what is right, they were ready for any challenge the future might bring. What had started with an act of compassion on a cold night had transformed into the most beautiful of families, one built not by blood, but by heart. David looked at the photo of Sarah on the shelf and whispered a silent, "Thank you." She would be proud to see how her last letter had helped create something so beautiful. The storm had passed, and in its place, a home filled with love, laughter, and hope had been born.